We are back with our first lesson, and today we're going to be really focusing on some generalities of how to get some clarity when it comes to nutrition, and the most important foundational concept I want you to start with in this course. So we all know there is a lot of information out there in terms of what to eat, and you will see everything from paleo, vegan, carnivore, Mediterranean, all the different diets all have their moment in the sun. And the reality is that they all have really one thing in common that they can all agree on. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So when we think about all of these diets, the one point of agreement is that we want to focus on whole, unprocessed food as much as possible. And this isn't just because we want to make life harder and make you spend more time in the kitchen. It's really because it changes how your metabolism works. So we know that there are different grades of foods. Some foods are completely minimally processed. You look at the back and there's maybe one ingredient or, less than 5, right? You can pronounce all of the names, you know exactly what they are. You could go and pick up those ingredients from the rest of the supermarket and go home and make the food yourself if you wanted to. Those are going to be minimally processed foods. When we think about the foods we want to avoid specifically, these are going to be more what we call highly processed foods. These are the foods that when you pick up the bag or box, they come in. So there's a clue right there. They come in bags and boxes. When you pick that up and you look at the ingredients, it's going to list definitely over 5 ingredients and definitely going to be some words that you can't pronounce, and that they aren't things that are actual foods you could go and buy at the supermarket. They wouldn't be things you'd find in your kitchen. That's because they are modified and they're made in a lab, or they are, a type of processing that's done to the food. So now that we know that these are not perfect, I want to give you a little bit of science to really back this up. It's one thing for me just to say, hey, don't eat processed food, but I really want you to understand why. And that's what this course is all about. So there was a study done in 2019. They took multiple participants and they put them into a metabolic ward, which basically means they live in a hospital setting for an entire month. And during that time, all of their intake is completely monitored and measured, and all of their output is monitored and measured. And so this way we can keep very, very tight controls on exactly what is causing changes in their metabolic function. So during this study, for the first 2 weeks, the participants are fed a diet that is primarily unprocessed food. This diet is comprised of the same macronutrients, meaning proteins, carbohydrates, and fats, as the second 2-week diet. It also has the same calories as the second 2-week diet. So they had similar macros, similar calories throughout the experiment. Now, what was interesting is they were given an amount of food that was well above what they would normally eat, and they were told to eat as much as they wanted. So eat until satisfaction. First 2 weeks is unprocessed. Other 2 weeks is a processed diet. And once again, just to reiterate how important this point is, it was the same calorie amount given. It was the same macronutrient breakdown given. Okay, so participants eat the unprocessed diet, they eat the processed diet. They also did it so they had some participants started with unprocessed and went to processed, and some started with processed and went to unprocessed. So they were making sure it wasn't that we just saw a change over time. They did a swap here. That's also really important. So what did they find? Basically, they found on the processed food diet for only 2 weeks, these patients gained fat mass. So they gained weight, and it wasn't from muscle, it was from fat mass. And they ate anywhere between 400 and 600 more calories a day. So again, just told to eat as much as they wanted, and they were eating 400 to 600 calories more in order to feel satisfied. These extra calories also came primarily from carbohydrate and fat, which is probably why they gained so much fat mass. We're going to talk about that a little bit more a little bit later, but the combination of increased carbohydrate and increased fat leads to fat gain on the body, typically. Now, on the unprocessed diet, which again, same calories, same macros, same instructions, in this section, the same participants, they lost fat mass without any difference in reported pleasantness of the food. So it wasn't like they were given a plate of lima beans and, they eat a few and they say, I'm good, and then they were just hungry. They said the food was just as pleasant as the processed food, and naturally they ate less and lost weight. So this is a great example of why the quality of food really, really matters. And it's really going to help us understand why looking toward these more minimally processed foods is a really good idea for our metabolic health. And then it also helps us support our overall inflammation. We know that increasing the processed foods in our diet automatically leads to, again, metabolic changes. And these metabolic changes can also include things like a change in your ability to handle blood glucose, and over time that can increase inflammation. So when we reduce these processed foods, our body is better able to function and our inflammation levels naturally come down. So how do we do this? Well, really easy way to think about it is, first, when you go grocery shopping, we're going to stick to really the perimeter of the store. So we're going to hit the things that don't have bags and boxes. Produce section, meats and cheeses, dairy. I will give you a word about dairy in a minute. And then the bakery type aisles, now that's going to be a little more complicated. So when we think about dairy, I have a specific example. This is where these foods are primarily going to come in some type of container. And they do have to undergo some type of processing in order to make them what they are, right? So let's talk about yogurt as an example. If we think about a really common yogurt, like Dannon Greek yogurt, everybody probably has it in their fridge right now. If we think about that food as compared to a Fage brand Greek yogurt, these are two very, very different foods. And we know this when we look at the back of the package. On the Dannon Greek yogurt, we see that it has cultured non-fat milk, water, strawberry puree, fructose, and then natural and artificial flavors, black carrot juice, modified food starch, potassium sucralose, citric acid, potassium sorbate, and then active yogurt cultures. So that's 12 ingredients. Where if we look at a Fage package, all it has is grade A pasteurized skim milk and live and active cultures, 2 things. So if I were to have to choose, I would definitely go for that Fage yogurt, and I would add some fresh strawberries to it. So this is just one example of ways that we can start becoming a more informed consumer and make different choices. And when it comes to, say, like the bread and bakery aisle, most, unfortunately, of these foods are going to be pretty processed. And so in this situation, it might be worthwhile to take a break from these foods and see how you feel. And if you really are missing that starchy, sort of grainy texture, make sure to add in things like quinoa and rice, and even, get a little adventurous and maybe you try some couscous, or even some pastas are going to be a much better choice because they're going to have way fewer ingredients. So again, looking at packages, counting the number of ingredients is another really easy thing to do. So we're going to shop the perimeter of the store. And then when we do have something that's in a bag or a box, ideally try and find things that are less than 5 ingredients listed on that package. So those are going to be your 2 action items for today. And hopefully that's going to get you started on the right foot, adventuring into the grocery store, finding some new things that you might not have tried before. And again, trying to just unprocess your diet as much as possible so that we can start pulling back on that inflammation, getting the body more nutrients, and really just more energy to give you the strength and capacity to get through this program and feel really great.